Hey guys, so I'm Brad, and I was doing a Facebook Live video the other day, and I was saying that I was going to come out and do a video. I was showing my garden and stuff, and I was saying I was going to make this video talking about where we are as a nation with our food supply. And so I wanted to just come out tonight. I've been out pulling weeds and stuff in the garden here, and I wanted to take a few minutes and just kind of take you through some, or give you some situational awareness as to where we are as a nation. And I'm not saying that something awful is going to happen. I'm not saying, I'm not being doom and gloom in saying this, but I think that it's still important for us to be prepared. I still think it's important for us to be situationally aware and to have an understanding of where does my food come from. 30 years ago, I met a young lady from Dubuque, Iowa, who said something to me that I've never forgotten. It was one of the... You could have pushed me over with a toothpick. So I was at this Lutheran Youth Leadership Conference over at Forest City, Iowa, at Waldorf. And the small group leader for my group had us plant soybeans, which I was born and raised on a farm. We had about 220 acres, about 220 acres, and or 200 acres, I should say. And so my dad raised soybeans, he raised corn, he raised oats, he raised alfalfa. We had dairy cows and stuff, and so I've walked more than my share of soybeans. You have to go out, and as a farmer, you have to go out and walk them. We used to, anyway. And before they started using all the chemicals, and so we would go out and walk these soybeans, and we'd have to pull all the weeds out of them. Well, the teacher's having us plant soybeans, and I'm like, dude, I've walked hundreds of acres of these stupid things. I know where they come from, and I know what they do, and I don't want to plant one. But this girl, I was sitting there and watching her, and all of a sudden you started seeing the light bulb go off. And she goes, "You mean if I plant this, it'll grow?" Yeah, it will. And she goes... Then we started talking a little bit more, and she said something that was so... It blew my mind. I've never forgotten it in 30 years. She said, "You mean my food doesn't come from the grocery store?" I'm like, "Honey, have you ever been out of Dubuque, Iowa? All you have to do is drive down the road and look, and you'll know that there's all kinds of fields all over." Well, you know what? That's really true. But at the same time, I also started figuring out something. Because I've always heard, growing up, that Iowa was the breadbasket of the world. California's the breadbasket of the world, too. But you know what? That's not really true. And so, here a few years ago, before my dad passed away in 2003, I was having a conversation with him one night, and I said to him, "Dad, what was Mobile, Iowa, the town that we grew up in? What was it like when you were a kid?" And he starts talking, and he says, "Well, we had, I said, "What kind of businesses were there?" And he said, "Well, we had a livery, we had a stockyards, we had a butcher, we had a hatchery." My dad would have been 88 this year, so he was significantly older when I was born. He wasn't old. I have a 1-year-old. And I'm 46, but I said, like I said, he was started talking about it, and we had a hatchery, a butcher, a locker, a Ford, a Chevy, and a Chrysler dealership, a John Deere, a Massey Harrison, a Farmall dealership. We had, 2 or 3 banks. We had 2 or 3 lumber yards. We had 2 or 3 hardware stores, 2 or 3 grocery stores, a lumber yard, all these different things. And we calculated it up, and we came up with about 35 different businesses on Main Street in Mobile, Iowa, which at the time was probably about 12 to 1,300 people, maybe 15. And Mobile had, we had a movie theater, we had a roller skating rink, we had a Five and Dime, I think we had a doctor, we had a pharmacy, we had a dentist, so on and so forth. And yet when I was growing up, most of the businesses on Main Street were empty. Most of the buildings were empty. And I'm like, what made the difference? We still had the hardware store. We only could support one. And we only had one grocery store. And so after my dad and I talked, I'm like, what made the difference? What was it that so changed Mobile? Because this was in the days before the internet. This was in the days before we started shopping online and stuff. And so I'm like, what was the deal? What was it that caused it? And then I started calculating it out. And Mobile has 4 townships surrounding it, which a township is, for those of you that don't know, a township is made up of a 6 mile by 6 mile square area. So you had 36 square miles. And each square mile typically had between 2 and 4 small scale farmers on it at one point back in the day. Well, now you may have farmers that are 5, 6, 10,000 acres. Each section is only 640 acres. And so minimum you had 144 small scale farmers at minimum. Because you had 144 square miles surrounding Mobile. So actually, you probably had 288 small-scale farmers. But those small-scale farmers were all going to town to buy hardware. They were all going to town to buy lumber. They were all going to town to buy, groceries. They were all going to town to buy all this different stuff. Equipment, cars, whatever it may be. And so our small town was able to support this stuff. And then I started doing some research, and the research led me down a rabbit hole that I will probably never recover from, because it really showed me a lot of things that have changed over the years, and it showed me some things that we need to get back to. So in the state of Iowa, we have something called the Leopold Center for Sustainable Agriculture. It's at Iowa State University. And the Leopold Center has done research over the years where they talk about what were the average number of crops grown on at least 1% of Iowa farms in the state of Iowa in 1900, 1910, over all the way through up to the 2000s. That list used to be over 40 crops long, be it pigs, cattle, sheep, goats, donkeys, horses, corn, beans, oats, rye, barley, so on and so forth, wheat. And that list today is lucky if it's 6, 7 crops that are grown on at least 1% of Iowa farms. And all of a sudden you start listening and you start looking at this and you start going, we have an issue. And so then I same website, the Leopold Center's website, I started looking up what crops are grown in the state of Iowa for food. I'm not talking corn and beans. What crops are grown in the state of Iowa, and what dollar amounts do we grow? They have this really awesome calculator, the Leopold Center does, where you can actually go on and figure out, we sell, I'm just going to make up numbers here, but just to give you an example, we sell $2 billion worth of lettuce a year. And you're able to go in and set parameters. You're able to go in and say, okay, what is the retail dollar value of that lettuce? What is the wholesale dollar value to the farmer? What is the retail dollar value to the farmer if he was to sell it directly? And all this different stuff. And so I went through this and I did it, and I just left everything at retail. I set everything to retail, and it shocked me. there's only one crop in the state of Iowa that we grow food-wise, not field corn, not soybeans. You can't eat field corn. You, I suppose, can make tofu if you're into that kind of stuff out of the soybeans. But so I started looking at it. I guess you can use field corn for tortillas and stuff, or nacho chips. But realistically, we have one crop in the state of Iowa that we use, or that we export anything of food-wise, is sweet corn. Everything else we import billions with a B of dollars worth of food into the state of Iowa. And I went to this organic growers conference one time, and one of the speakers there was talking about how our former Secretary of Ag for the state of Iowa, Patty Judge, was talking that if we ever had to shut our borders to the state of Iowa to food imports and not let food come in because of a bioterrorism attack or whatever, we literally have 4 to 5 days supply of food in the state of Iowa. And so that really got me to thinking about, what are we doing? Where are we going? Where are we headed? And as I started looking at it, it became very apparent to me that we have a major issue. And it's not that towns have to set aside 500 days worth of food. That's not going to work. That's not the solution. The solution is that each one of us take ownership, take responsibility, and take a part in it, and start growing at least a little bit of our own food, start growing some for ourselves, canning some, putting some aside, putting it up. We can do it on a small scale basis. You know, I have 6 kids, 5 of them still at home, so I'm going to show you my garden. You know, that's just all my melons and my winter squash and my summer squash and my sweet corn and my Indian corn that I'm going to use for nachos or whatever. But then there's my potatoes and my tomatoes. I got to get my peppers in the ground yet. But there's all my chickens. Now, you don't have to have something this big. I have enough that with my chickens and stuff, I can actually either sell some chickens or, you know, whatever with them. But on an acre or acre and a half of ground, or on a city lot, if you're, you know, ingenious and have a greenhouse and you can grow food year round in a small greenhouse, you don't have to have a huge greenhouse to grow enough food to keep food on the table. You just have to be smart about it. You have to do succession planning. You have to do some planning. You have to think ahead. You can't just go willy-nilly and go, oh, hey, great. It's not going to work. You know, you have to think about what kind of heat source am I going to have in the greenhouse? What am I going to do? You know, I have a greenhouse too, but a lot of my stuff's in the garden this year. And the greenhouse is going to serve several purposes. It's going to have, you know, some of my warm season crops in there during the wintertime because it's going to be heated. So I can still have fresh stuff. But, you know, I'm going to make salsa and I'm going to can a lot. And you know, we're going to put a lot of stuff up this year. But if you think about it, this isn't abnormal. Going to the grocery store and buying all of our food from the grocery store is abnormal. We haven't done that. You know, yeah, you have the markets in other countries. You had, you know, you would go to the market and you'd buy and sell and trade for stuff at the market, stuff that you didn't grow, stuff that you didn't have. But you still had something that you were growing. You had still something that you were providing to your family. And it's only been in the last few years, last 100 years or so, that we've stopped doing that and stopped thinking about long-term preparedness for our families and how are we going to handle if we get a big blizzard. You know, 1948, I believe, or 49, it was, you know, Wyoming, Montana, Colorado all got hit by a blizzard that dumped hundreds of feet almost Literally, it took them from the blizzard happened like the 5th of January, and some parts were still digging out by the 1st of April. That's how bad it was. These guys just got pounded. It snowed, it blizzarded for over a week, and they just had double digits of snow, like 15, 20 feet of snow. It was awful. But the people that were prepared, the people that had small scale farms, the people that had the ranchers, those guys all had food. They were prepared. They were living high off the hog, so to speak. So there's things that you can do. There's things that I can do. And I'm doing it by growing a garden this year. And I'm doing it by setting stuff aside. And you can do the same, whether you live in town or out in the country. And so I wanted to take some time tonight, give you a little bit of an idea of where we're at. And I'll have more stuff to discuss in the future. We'll be discussing raw milk. In the state of Iowa, you might as well sell heroin as to sell raw milk. It's almost a capital offense, which is absolutely asinine. We'll be talking about small-scale agriculture, and we'll be discussing the average age of farmers and where things are going with that. I mean, if you look at it now, the average age of most farmers is 68 years old, 65 to 68, somewhere in there. That's not good. The average age is 65 or 68. It means we don't have a lot of young guys in the farming industry anymore. And we need to get people back to the farm. We need to get people back to the land. And so what I want to endeavor to show you through this series of videos is how can we do it? How can we be prepared to share with those around us? And how can we be prepared to care about those around us? A drowning man can't save a drowning man. And so I don't want you drowning. I want you prepared. I want you ready for whatever it may be. Whether anything ever comes or not. You know what? History has a way of repeating itself, and we always have bad situations. We always have stuff comes up. Whether it be on a personal level and we have economic chaos in our own personal finances. Whether it be nationwide, if we have Greece. Look at Greece. You have a whole nation that's going through economic collapse. So how can we be prepared for whatever it may be, and how can we be prepared to care about those around us? So I encourage you to share this video with those that you care about and love. On a side note, I will ask you to help me out with something, and that is that I started a company called TeshuaTea.com because I got tired of hearing all the negative reports about, this person's being trafficked and that person's being trafficked, and I wanted to bring hope back into the world, and that's part of the reason I'm doing this series of videos on farming. But with Teshua Tea, I partnered up with a buddy of mine that's a missionary to Asia, and he rescues girls out of sex trafficking. And I don't tell you this to go doom and gloom. I tell you this because we're bringing hope. Just like what we're doing right here in the garden. We're bringing hope. All these baby plants, all those baby tomatoes that you can't see on the other side of the potatoes over there. All that stuff is bringing hope. It's all hope for a new day. It's all hope, it's stuff being set aside. Well, we have a really unique opportunity because this buddy of mine, like I said, he's a missionary to Asia. And he's already rescuing these girls. And what they do is they get them into a rescue and rehab house, and the girls are taught to make bracelets, they're taught to make coasters, they're taught to make, harvest and process tea and coffee and stuff. And then we purchase the products from the girls, economically empowering them so that when they leave our program, that they're able to stand on their own. And then we take care of their monthly expenditures while they're living with us in our rescue and rehab house over there in Asia. We have a couple staff of 19 girls that we've rescued so far, over 19 girls. But anyway, I encourage you to stop by TeshuaTea.com. It's TeshuaTea.com. And check out the bracelets, because a majority of our profits are going back to the rescue and rehab facility to care for those around us and to care for the girls. so that we can buy another rescue and rehab house and stuff. So just as a side note, I want to put a little plug in, and hopefully you'll check out our site. Give me some comment ideas, or give me some ideas on things you want to discuss, and we'll talk about them. So you guys have a blessed night.